Hello and welcome to the first episode of Toby's AMA, or Ask Me Anything. I'm Toby, and the goal of this podcast is to give our YouTube subscribers a chance to get involved a little bit more with the Britsent channel by literally asking me anything. We'll be uploading a new episode each week, so please keep the comments and questions coming, as we'll be choosing new questions to answer every week. Just before we dive into your questions, let me just briefly explain how I'm going to answer them. I'll firstly read the subscriber's name, followed by their question, and if there are any grammatical or lexical mistakes, then I'll correct these before I answer the question. I'll also define any difficult idiomatic language I might use, as well as introduce you to some colloquialisms along the way. Okay, so now that my rather dull explanation is out of the way, let's get down to your comments. We've had lots of comments already, which is really great. And it was very difficult for me to narrow all the questions down to answer. But let's get into it. Our first question is from Bubbly. And Bubbly has asked, which football team do you stand for? Okay, which football team do you stand for? Okay, so great question. Just to suggest a more natural way to ask this question, which football team do you support? So, which football team do you support? Right, so I am probably one of the few British people who doesn't watch or support a football team at all. So, when people ask me questions about football or talk about football around me, a lot of the information goes over my head. And what I mean by that is that I don't understand what they're talking about because I don't have a big interest in football, so it goes over my head. I don't understand. Okay, sorry about that, Bubbly. I wish I could answer your question further, give you a bit more information about British football, but to be totally honest, I know nothing about British football. I know, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Okay, thank you, Bubbly. So, next question. Our next question is from Oriental_Express666. What a username. Okay, so your question, what do you do for fun, especially during coronavirus situation? Okay, so let's just make that question a little bit more natural. What do you do for fun, especially during the lockdown due to coronavirus? So, as you may or may not know, the UK has been in lockdown for quite some time now. And so, to stop myself from going totally crazy, I have been running, trying to keep a regular exercise routine. So running, also playing board games or video games at home with family, cooking lots of new dishes using some older cookbooks or some new recipes that I find online. That's been definitely taking up a lot of time. And also I'm learning Spanish at the moment, so I've got a few online courses I'm studying, as well as using a mobile phone app called Duolingo. And Duolingo is a really great free application anyone can use to study many languages all around the world. So go and give it a download. It's totally free. Can't recommend that application enough. I think lastly, I've been reading. So reading books, trying to get through my large stack of books that have collected over the last years and months. So it's been a good time to try and reduce the amount of books that I'm keeping around the house, taking up a lot of space. Okay, thank you for that question. Let's get on to the next one. And this is from JNB. Okay, how do I understand Cockney accent? They don't pronounce sound T, but sometimes I don't understand at all when they speak quickly. Okay, so let's make that question a little bit more natural and a bit more grammatically correct. How do I understand the Cockney accent? I know the letter T isn't pronounced, and sometimes I can't understand anything when they speak quickly. Yes, very good question, and good to bring that to my attention as well. I think even for native speakers of English, sometimes the Cockney accent can be quite difficult to listen to and to decipher, to understand. So let's just have a look at a few different ways we can try and understand the Cockney accent. So, as you already said in your question, people with a Cockney accent would usually drop the letters T and K from the middle of words. For example, Scottish would become Scottish, and blackboard would become blackboard. Okay? So just a couple of examples there of dropping the letter T and K from the middle of words. Another big thing to listen out for when someone's speaking with a Cockney accent is dropping the letter H from the beginning of words. So, hopefully would become hopefully. Hopefully. Okay, and another really important one to remember when you're listening to a Cockney accent is replacing the TH sound in English with the F sound or the V sound. So, for example, think would be think, I think, and northern would become northern, northern. So, dropping that TH and having a strong V sound there. So really, really great question there, and also a good opportunity for me to introduce to you some famous Cockney rhyming slang phrases. And for those of you that don't know about Cockney rhyming slang, this is a way of speaking that I believe originated in the mid-19th century in East London, and people believe it evolved as just a simple language game, and others say that it was used to confuse policemen or non-locals, so even foreigners, just as a fun way to adapt the English language. It usually consists of a two-word phrase that is used to stand for a specific word, and most importantly, that substituting phrase must rhyme with the original word. So, for example, apples and pears, this means stairs. So, let's go up the apples and pears. Let's go upstairs. That's what we're saying. Okay, let's look at one more just before we move on to the next question. I think this one leads quite nicely into the next question. Baked bean. Baked bean. Look who's on TV. It's the baked bean. So here, funnily enough, we mean queen. Baked bean rhymes with queen. Look who's on TV. It's the baked bean. It's the Queen of England. Okay, they might be a little bit odd, a bit confusing to some of you out there who haven't heard of Cockney rhyming slang before. But just give it a Google. I'm sure you'll find lots of phrases, and they should hopefully brighten your day, make you laugh a little bit. Some of them can be a little bit ridiculous. Okay, so leads me nicely onto my next question from Sung Woojong, and they've asked, under a constitutional monarchy system, is it always the Queen who makes a final decision as to grave national concerns relating to national defence, such as dispatching troops to Iraq? Okay, wow, big question, heavy question. So let's just try and make that question a little bit more natural to begin with before I answer it. under a constitutional monarchy, is it always the Queen who makes final decisions concerning national security or matters of great importance, such as dispatching troops to Iraq? Okay, so I had to do a little bit of research in order to answer this question because, to be totally honest, I didn't know. I'm not too sure on what the Queen's role is in government and in Parliament. And so, after doing some Googling, a little bit of quick research, I found out that as head of the state, the Queen must remain strictly neutral with respect to political matters. So the Queen doesn't vote or stand for election, but she does have ceremonial and formal roles in relation to the government of the UK. So she has a meeting once a week with the Prime Minister, and that can either be in person or via telephone if they are unable to meet face to face. And I think this is just a good way for the Prime Minister to update the Queen on, as the question asked, any important matters of national security or grave concern. So I hope that answers your question a little bit more. You can understand a bit more about the Queen's role in government. Okay, so I think we have time now for maybe 2 more questions, as I'm going to try and keep this podcast to around 15 minutes every week. You don't want to be boring your head off every week with 30-minute to 1 hour podcasts. So let's keep this short. 2 more questions. Let's have the next one from Matt Joan Ramen. And your question was, do you like Teletubbies? Okay, so right now, I'm not the biggest fan of Teletubbies anymore, but I can definitely say that when I was younger, I loved watching Teletubbies. I watched it every week. I remember the theme song. I remember Nunu, the Hoover, and I've also learned that Teletubbies in Korea is actually called Teletobi. So I believe this might be why you asked me this question. Okay, so let's have the last question. We've got time for 1 more, and this is from Sungha Seo, and they have asked, what do English people see in beauty? What is your standard? Okay, so just a small suggestion here to make this question a little bit more natural. How do British people define beauty? What is your standard? Okay, good question. Great question, actually. And to be totally honest, I think it's subjective, completely subjective. So I think what one person sees as beauty or as beautiful might be totally different to what the next person sees, to what someone else sees. And we have a really good expression here in the UK, a great idiom I can leave you with, and that is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And what we really mean when we use this expression is that different people have different perceptions of what is beautiful. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't think I'm completely qualified to speak on behalf of the entire British population about their standards of beauty, but I'll leave you with that very common British idiomatic expression. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, well, thank you so much for all of your comments, all of your questions this week. Sorry that I didn't get around to answering every single one of them. There are a lot more questions than we have time for in this short podcast, but hopefully we can get around to answering a few more next week. So I hope everyone has a fantastic week, and I look forward to answering more of your questions next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.